This is video 9B in our Systems Analysis and Design course, and it's entitled The UI Design Process. The previous video was about usability and what makes up a pleasant design, but this video goes into the steps of how we actually do design a user interface. I'm James Imrano, PhD from Shawnee State University, and I'll be taking you through this presentation. So we talked about components that make up a good user interface, but now how do we actually create a good user interface? And the author of our textbook, as well as I, believe that what we really need to do is, one, we need to understand our users. Makes sense? Understand. And then once we understand the users, we can start to organize our interface. We can then, as we start organizing things and start laying things out and figuring out how we're going to do it, we can define our user interface standards that we talked about in the previous, but also standards for how they're organized and how they're laid out, and not the micro standards, but the kind of macro standards, the high-level standards. And then we need to develop a series of prototypes to get user input and talk about the prototyping process. So we're going to talk about these four things that we need to do in order to create a good user interface, remembering that we're always evaluating and testing. And it's a loop, because as we organize the interface, we may say, I don't really understand the user. So go back up. As we're defining the standards, we may have to go back up to the users and ask them. As we're developing the prototypes, we may reorganize our interface as required. So remember, this is not just a waterfall, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, get it done. It's an iterative process, a circular process, where we're always evaluating and testing the user interface. So the first thing we need to do is we need to understand the users and the uses. Who will be using the system or that part of the system? Will it be an end user, an end consumer? Will it be a technician? Will it be a manager? Will it be an expert? Will it be a novice? Will it be a... So we've got to understand who's using the system, and then we're also going to need to know where they will be using it. Are they using it on their home PC, their phone, their tablet? Are they using it on a corporate workstation, which would maybe be more powerful? Are they using it on specialized hardware, a kiosk, or a specialized kind of something? Are they using it connected to the internet online? Are they using it offline? Remotely, or disconnected from the internet, or potentially both online and offline? What we often will do is we'll create a persona. A persona is a kind of a biography of a fake person. We imagine the users. My grandmother's going to be using this system because she orders from this company online. So I've got a persona called Nana. And in Nana's persona, I've got things about her. I've got descriptions of how she reacts, the hardware she has, where she's using it, what she's trying to do with the system. I also have a persona for the customer service reps that are working for the company to help Nana. Maybe you've got all different kinds of users. Maybe you've got power users that want shortcuts and easy ways, and regular users. So create these biographies of imaginary users with the tasks they want to do, and also be sure to include their limitations, so that whenever you're designing the user interface, and later when you're testing the user interface, you can make sure that the user interfaces will work for these people. And if it works for your personas, if you've done a nice job in creating them, the chance of it actually working in the field for your end consumers, your stakeholders, pretty good. The next thing we need to do, after we kind of understand who our users are and where they're going to be using this software, in a shop floor, factory, home, business, automobile, whatever, is that we need to organize the user interface. How are we going to group functions? How are we going to group screens? Are we going to do it in kind of a ring topology where users can get around, going from one to the next, or going sequentially through the system? Are we going to create a kind of a menu-based hierarchy where they can find what they want? But this hierarchy is kind of difficult because you can see already it's getting to 4 layers. So, but we need to use and organize the UI, thinking about what our general structure is going to be. So this next idea of defining standards really connects directly to how we organize our system. There's a term that you've learned in your English classes and writing classes and in life in general called the metaphor. And a metaphor is kind of a representation of something. It's not really what it is, but it's a nice kind of general thought idea representation. For instance, stop and think about an online system, an online shopping system you were in recently, an online store. There's this thing called a shopping cart or a basket, and you put items in the basket. Is it a real shopping cart like you have at the Kroger with the wheels that shake you to death? No, but it's a metaphor. It's a design thought. It's something that humans understand. And taking the basket to the checkout, well, that makes sense because you take your your basket to the checkout when you're checking out at the dollar store. Stop and think about a jukebox idea. What if you had an audio sharing site or an audio site, and you created a device that was kind of a screen that kind of felt like a jukebox where they could flip through pages of what they were looking for and choose songs and cue them? Think about the metaphor of the post office. Email. Well, email is really not a lot like snail mail, but we still use the same metaphors, the same terms of a address, an email address, a mailbox, and all of those kinds of things. So are there old devices? For instance, maybe you're creating a system for a client to replace an old specialty piece of hardware. You would want your new system to use some of the same design metaphor and ideas so that the users feel very comfortable with it. I'm thinking like an electronic, PC-based, computer-based oscilloscope. That's a device that shows waves of radio or signal waves, versus the old device that would sit in the corner with a green screen that would flicker. But because we understand that old hardware device, our new electronic devices have the same kind of design feel, the same metaphor. So we need to define those metaphors in our standards. We also need to define names and descriptions of all of our objects and actions, and all of the programmers and all of the users and all of the stakeholders and all of the analysts need to use the same conventions when we're talking about our actions and objects. We need to make sure our pictures and our hieroglyphs and our icons are all standard and our buttons all feel the same. And I believe that we need to create standard templates, a standard layout and starting place for a screen, so that all of the things are the same. Every programmer starts with this template, modifies it as needed, tweaks it, adjusts it, so that everything feels the same. So after we've come up with our organization, then we need to define our standards. After we've decided our organization, we've understood our users and where, we've got some standards, now we need to develop some prototypes. Now, prototypes are non-functional, and users will sometimes see a prototype and go, well, you've already got the system written. No, I don't have any of the business logic. I don't have any of that done. I'm way behind. I mean, there's a lot of work, months of work to do, but I want to get you to see if you like the feel of where we're going. Think of an architect that would build a cardboard model of a building, and it sits about like this big on the desk, and the user can say, Yeah, I kind of like that. And maybe they lift the roof off so the user can take their finger and pretend like they're a little human being walking through this prototype of a building. It's a whole lot easier to change a cardboard building made out of, or a model of a building or a model of a plane, than it is to build a whole plane, throw it away, and build a whole nother plane because they don't like the shape or don't like the way it works. So prototypes come in fidelities. A low fidelity prototype is quick, doesn't have a lot of information, and it comes from sound quality. We've all heard sounds that we download that are small files, quick to download, but they don't sound very good. Where if we want a sound that sounds really good and really great with our headsets, we've got to download a big file and it's slower. We call that high fidelity. So a low fidelity prototype might be a wireframe where we just draw boxes on a page and say, well, we'll put the header here, we'll put the menu over here, we'll put this over here, and there you go. And the user will say, okay. The next kind of prototype would be a drawing, where we maybe go to Illustrator or Draw.io or whatever drawing program we like to use, and we would create a drawing of what the page would look like, or what a sample page would look like, or what the menus would look like. And the user could say, well, yeah, I don't like that color. I don't like that. Could you move the menus up here and do a menu across instead of a menu down? Or, well, doing it with a drawing at this point is very easy. We just go into our drawing tool and move our objects around, and there you go. Another kind of medium fidelity prototype would be the HTML prototype, where we go into a WYSIWYG HTML editor or into HTML if we're really comfortable with HTML, and we create kind of a prototype screen and say, here, it doesn't work, there's no logic behind it, but you can click, you can tab, and again, there's more fidelity in it than a drawing because the user can actually click, but it's still not the done system. The highest of fidelity prototypes are often called language prototypes, where we would lay the user interface out using the actual design tool that we're going to use for the finished product. None of the business logic is there, none of the updates, none of the databases, none of the queries, all of that back end stuff isn't there, but the user interface has started to lay out. And then we call that a language prototype, and that would be the highest of fidelity of prototypes. So there were those four kind of principles for how we go about creating a user interface. But throughout the entire time, we have to be evaluating and testing our system. And that's why I've got that big blue always up there, because always we should be evaluating and testing our design as we move through our process. Heuristic evaluations are the kind of checks us developers do, the analysts do, that we're doing without the users being involved. A heuristic evaluation, we've got a checklist of things that the system has to have, checklist of requirements. We have our standards documents that we say that it'll look like this, that'll look like this, and it'll be in this order, and the field will act like this. So the heuristic evaluation is where we as developers, we as analysts, folks on the development team have gone through and validated and evaluated our user interface to make sure that we're not violating our own rules. The next thing then would be to do a walkthrough. And a walkthrough is where we would usually have a system projected on the screen, have a group of users in a room, and take the users through our wireframes, take the users through our low fidelity prototypes. We might have a storyboard and say, well, customer service representative Q is going to get a phone call from customer A, and they're going to do the following. And then we would show drawings of, well, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. And the user can kind of go, well, no, it doesn't work that way. We've got to move this here and this here. Yay! because we just saved the system and we're doing it with low fidelity prototypes that are much easier to update, change, and get correct without having to throw code away. As we evaluate and test, we're moving now up the fidelity level of our prototypes to an interactive evaluation. An interactive evaluation is where we use a high fidelity prototype, usually a language prototype, where real world users will sit down in front of it. Now, it doesn't actually work, but we will say, okay, put in a purchase order or put in an order or do this. And they'll go, well, go here, put this here, and put this here, and they type this here, and they go here, and then they say, well, then I would go to the next screen, and here you look for places where the users are uncertain. You look for where they don't know what they're doing, because if they don't know what they're doing, you're not visible. You're not content aware. You're not making it easy on them. So you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. At this interactive evaluation, you're looking for issues, confusions, uncertainty, and improvements. The user will say, well, we don't use that very often. Can we put that somewhere else, or can we? So, or they say, we use this all the time. Where is it? It's not here. So again, the interactive evaluation, and you do this with the people who are really going to use the system. People that are really going to use the system. Not just developers, not just the managers, not just the bosses. This is where we want to get it in the hands of people that are really going to use the system to help us make sure that our prototypes are going to work. Because again, modifying a prototype is much easier than modifying a system once it's written. And then lastly, as we're almost finished, as we're almost done, there's a process of evaluation and testing that we call usability testing. Usability testing is where we've got a good language prototype, or we've got an almost finished system, and we want to use it in a laboratory or controlled environment. We want to set the users down in front of this prototype and say, here's a problem, figure it out. Here's a problem, see if you can do it. Here's something you're going to do every day, have at it. And we're going to see what the users really do. We're going to see what they actually do, and we're going to see the problems they have. We're going to observe, we're going to note, and this is again something we're going to do towards the end, because we've done the other types of evaluation and testing. So hopefully there aren't a lot of big problems here, but there very easily could be. Maybe we're designing a system that goes to the dashboard of automobiles. And we've done interactive evaluations, and we've done wireframes, and we've done this, and we've done all of that. But we forgot that people drive their cars at night, and the screens don't look well in the dark. Again, we've gone through and we're now creating real world scenarios and trying to get them to happen. Usability testing. And it's all part of this process, this iterative process. This isn't a one or done thing. This isn't a do it once and done. This is an interactive process through the entire development cycle. This concludes video 9B in our Systems Analysis and Design series. This video is copyright 2020 by James Imbrano, PhD. All rights are reserved under copyright, and I'd like to say thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.